session with yours truly, Dr. Sarah L. Webb of Colorism Healing. Today's topic is a response to the question, is colorism still a problem? So, I do these lives every week, and it can kind of be a struggle to come up with interesting ideas each week. And so I do online researching to see what people are asking about. And I know for my followers, this might be a very obvious question, but as I mentioned in my preview to this live, it's helpful to discuss it, for the people out there who might find this video who aren't aware that colorism still exists, but also for all of us to be able to talk to others who are less informed than we are, right? So if someone is saying, oh, well, I'm shocked, is this really a thing? Or I didn't realize it was such a big issue, right? Then it's good to practice and have conversations about how we inform and educate the people around us as well. And I know a lot of the people who follow me on Instagram or my YouTube channel are really interested in learning how they can talk to other people about colorism as well. So it's not just what do we know or still need to know, but it's kind of important that we continue to raise awareness beyond ourselves, right? So that's what we're talking about today. Not only is colorism still a problem, but if it's still a problem, has it gotten worse? So that's another question I get often is, do I think colorism is worse now than it was in the past, right? And then what does it look like now? Has it changed or evolved in terms of how it manifests over the years? And before we get into the topic, I do have some announcements. And as always, I want to see who's watching. I see very familiar names and profile pictures on the live. So hello, everyone, to returning viewers. And if this is your first time, or even if you're a repeat viewer, let me know how you're doing today, where you're watching from, and what the weather is like where you are. You can actually kind of see the weather where I am. So it's a sunny, hot day. I used to complain / praise the Midwest weather for being really mild. Summers are cool and, well, to me, in terms of being from South Louisiana, the summers have been kind of breezy and not too hot. But today I had to walk, I walked a total of 90 minutes today to run some errands, and it was actually hot and humid. I was like, this is a day where it's hot and humid in the Midwest. So, but yeah, I hope you all are fine and that you're not having too much issues with your weather. I know it's stormy in some places, near Hawaii and things. People are having trouble with their internet and stuff. But my announcement is, well, one, thank you to everyone who showed up to the live book launch on Friday. It was really, really beautiful. The recording is still up on the YouTube page. There's a playlist of all the previous live book launches, so you can, again, see some of the writers who participated this year in the contest. They read their work. They talk about what their inspiration was for writing it. Just truly, truly beautiful. And it's always my favorite event of the year for that reason. So thank you to everyone who watched live and participated live. Thank you to people who watched the recording and just people who continue to be in this community. Even if you didn't watch, even if you never buy the book or a book in the future, the fact that you are at the table with me and with all of us trying to do something about this really important issue, it means the world to me and to all dark-skinned girls out there and dark-skinned boys and, people who want to understand their privilege. It's important. So that's me gushing. I love to gush about my audience. I said this before, but someone sent me a DM and they were like, you have great followers. And I was like, I do. Yes, I love my followers. I'm such fans. I'm such a fan. All right. So, hey, Lucid Los, welcome. Always good to see you. Hey, Sarah Bestwill, lots of love from Boston. 91 and humid. Yeah, it's 91 here too in Illinois. Hey, Jackie, what's up, girl? Bertberry Colorism, always good to see you. Hi, I'm watching from Kenya. It is a cold night, though the day was warmer. Okay, cool. Sarah Bessel says, I'm so sad I missed the event. I was swamped at work. Definitely will check out your YouTube. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, the recording is still going to have a lot of value I have to mail out some tote bags and free copies of the book to people who answered the trivia questions. I did like a couple of rounds of Colorism Healing trivia, and so gave away some swag as part of that. But yeah, look, I'll be posting more official information about the book too. So anyone who's interested in purchasing a PDF copy or a paperback copy, PDF versions are $7. Paperback copies are $20.21. So 2021. I'm weird. Like I like when numbers correspond to something. Yeah. All right. Without further ado, folks, let me jump into today's topic. So as I mentioned when I first started, one of the ways I come up with topic ideas every week is I search around on Google and YouTube and see what people are typing in to search. What kinds of things are people searching for when they're looking for information about colorism online? And so there's a question that apparently was really popular. I was surprised that it was such a recommended topic for me to talk about. Is the question, is colorism still a problem? And so I previewed this topic on Sunday, I think, and I mentioned that I think some people who ask that question genuinely are not aware of the fact that colorism still exists. However, I also think people ask that question because they're looking for evidence that it still exists, right? So maybe they know it still exists, but they're trying to prove it to someone else. They're trying to have the conversation with someone else who maybe doesn't believe or isn't convinced yet. And so people might be searching for explanations and ways to talk about colorism existing in the present. I'll also say, though, that yes, it's yes. You don't have to wonder what my answer is about that. So I'm not so much focusing on the answer, but evidence of the answer. So yes, it definitely still exists. It's definitely still a huge problem. And I also kind of want to add on a second question, which is, has it gotten worse or has it gotten better, right? And that can be subjective, depending on the framework you choose to determine better versus not better, right? And then before I get too deep, I also want to say this. I will never be able to convince someone that colorism is real if they don't want to believe it, right? You will never convince someone that colorism is a legitimate problem, a serious problem that we should care about if they don't want to believe it. There will always be people who deny colorism, just like there are people who deny racism. There are people who say things like sexism are made up, like, oh, that's made up. I think, men are actually the ones being oppressed and, our racism doesn't exist anymore and it's all in your head, right? So there will always be some remnant of people who, no matter what evidence you give them, they don't want to hear it. And I think that's important because I've had people write comments in my posts saying well, you're not going to convince these people. You're not going to change people's minds. And so I'm very explicit when I say I don't put out content to quote unquote convince people, right? I'm not trying to persuade people who are not interested. And so when I make a video, when I share a post, it's really to present information, to share ideas with people and allow them to learn as they see fit. Right? Allow people who may be curious or maybe who are aware it's a problem but want extra strategies for dealing with it, or people who are just genuinely not aware of it, right? So not that they're outright denying it or dismissing it, but they just haven't been shown a perspective about the world through the lens of colorism before, and yet they would actually be open to learning more, right? So I'm not here for the ones who want to ignore colorism, because there's that remnant of people for sure. All right. Oh, thank you, Sarah. Always super, super supportive, Sarah. Thank you for the badge. And so there are 3 different types of evidence that I was using to think about. And of course, leave your comments and questions in the chat as well, the live chat. And if you're not watching live, if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're listening to the podcast and you want to participate in the live, you can join me on Instagram every Tuesday at 2:00 Central Time. So the first piece of evidence I think is really important when we ask, is colorism still a problem? Does it still exist? And my answer is yes, because people are still reporting instances of colorism, right? So people are still reporting the fact that they're being told, oh, you're cute to be dark, right? People are still reporting the fact that their mother tells them to not play in the sun. Or, someone suggested that they use a lightening cream, or that if they would look so pretty with blue contacts, And so people are still giving testimony, giving their firsthand accounts of instances of colorism. And there are even more severe testimonies and reports of colorism than that, right? People talk about being looked over for, career opportunities because of their skin tone. Or people talk about being like really mistreated in relationships, in their intimate relationships, because they're darker skinned and their partner thinks that they're doing them a favor by being with them, and so they treat them in a certain way, right? People are sharing these on a daily basis. And one of the reasons why I think I'm starting with this piece of evidence is because we have to learn how to listen to and believe dark-skinned women in particular when they talk about their experiences with colorism. So yes, dark-skinned women are not the only people who experience colorism. Dark-skinned men also experience colorism, but the vast majority of the people who are openly, actively having this discussion are dark-skinned women, and they are most likely to be ignored. Dark-skinned women are the most likely to experience gaslighting. Dark-skinned women are the most likely to be dismissed, are told that they're just making it up, told that they're just crazy, or they're trying to make something a problem that's not really a problem. All the ways that people, and also told that you're jealous and insecure, right? All the ways that people try to silence and shut down dark-skinned women who are giving their testimony. And so it's critically important that we value the actual accounts of colorism that dark-skinned women talk about they experience. And one way to dismiss that is to demand additional evidence, right? Like, your testimony as a dark-skinned woman does not stand on its own, right? I need a research study to prove that what you experienced was real. Or I need some statistics, I need some data to prove that what you experienced is actually a problem, is actually a thing. And so I want to say, if a dark-skinned woman says she experienced colorism, accept it at face value, full stop, right? Don't suggest, oh, well, are you sure it was this? Or maybe it was actually that. Well, have you considered this or that? Like, no. Like, just allow them to say, this is what I experienced, this is what my reality is like, and believe them the way you believe everybody else, okay? And I know I'm not talking to the people who are watching live. I'm just talking in general, right? Because I know y'all believe dark-skinned women. I got some comments coming in. Let me see what folks are talking about. See what y'all talking about. Lucid Low says, I believe colorism has gotten worse because now it is magnified on social media for the entire world to see and imitate. Yes, I definitely think social media has given colorism a platform that it's never seen before. The Black Roseway, hey, how are you doing? Thank you so much for everything you do to educate people on colorism. Same. I've enjoyed following your account recently, and the way you talk about colorism is really interesting to me as well. JB1710 says, a lot of what people say is racism is really colorism, as you have stated before. Yeah, a lot of time we are so used to conversations around racism, and racism is, gets the spotlight. But I think that is an oversight, a really dangerous oversight, really. And I talk about how sometimes we wonder why we're not making more progress on racism. And I say it's because racism is actually not the problem you think it is. It's actually not the root of a lot of these inequalities or experiences that people are talking about. And so not acknowledging colorism as a cause of some of these problems is one of the reasons we haven't seen more progress with these problems in society. Vertberry Colorism says, I agree with Lucid Los, and there are positive things that social media has done, like giving a platform for people to speak. Yeah, it's definitely made it easier to speak up against colorism as well. Sarah Bestwill says, I recently started watching All American on Netflix, and wow, the colorism is so obvious. Sarah Bestwill, I'm so glad to hear you say that you started watching a TV show and the colorism was obvious to you, because I think that's kind of where culturally I hope we get to. Just like, other issues might be obvious to us when we see it. I think that's one phase of addressing colorism, is for people to actually be able to recognize it and see it, right? And so to me, that says a lot, that you're able to look through that lens now and recognize it in the media or in the spaces around you. All right. Alyssa, thank you. Yeah, I love Alyssa so much. Director of Midwest Mixed. Thanks for the badge. So the other piece of evidence is actually social media. So Lucid Los, I think we're on the same page here. And I call it modern, contemporary, present day documentation. So a lot of the content itself is colorist, right? And so you can see it in the social media content itself, right? And in the far past, we'll say, colorism was just experienced in like your local community, right? Like your family, if you went to a school, right? Because we didn't have access to media like talking about. And then in the more recent past, with, the advent of like TV becoming popular and music videos becoming popular, then it got kind of more expansive. It started to grow a little bit more. But even like in the 80s and 90s with like TV and magazines and billboards and music videos, it was still a select few people who could produce that content, right? It wasn't just your everyday average Joes or average Janes or average Jills creating content. And so, yes, you saw colorism in the media in the 80s and 90s, 60s, 70s, whenever TV was invented, I don't know. But it was only coming from like a very few sources. And so I think with social media, now the colorism is coming from everybody, right? So any and everybody who is colorist can spout or spew their hatred for the world to hear and see. And I think that's why it is worse now. That's one way to see how it is gotten worse now, like Lucid Low says, and people can imitate that, and people are continuing to be conditioned by that information. And so I posted this as a comment. So someone had reshared one of those smash or pass videos, pass or smash. It was a pass or smash video, right? Even that like whole thing is hugely problematic, right? Like the existence of those videos for whatever reason is not good in the first place. But when it relates to colorism specifically, people have been resharing a lot of those videos of how the dark-skinned girl is ostracized or told that she's the exception, right? Like, I usually don't, do dark skins, but you cute though. Like just all kinds of random comments. And so my comment, someone tagged me in a comment. And so I responded to their comment and I said, yes, this is a problem, but reposting that video is actually contributing to the problem and not helping to solve the problem. And so I'd like to offer a pro tip for anyone who wants to address colorism on social media, is that you don't have to repost the colorist content to talk about it, to critique it. You don't have to repost it in order to have a conversation about what's going on, okay? Sometimes it might be necessary to include an example or a screenshot, right, to help you illustrate your point. But for the most part, you can describe what happens in the video. You can summarize what happens in the video. And the reason why I say that is because when I saw that tag, and the video was just posted without a caption either. It was just like a bunch of hashtags in the video, and it got like hundreds of thousands of likes. You know how it goes. And I said, this is actually triggering for a lot of dark-skinned people. And so, it's giving colorist people, it's giving colorism an even bigger platform than it deserves. I mean, think about it. If you're resharing someone's content, you're actually making them more popular in the algorithm, right? Let's keep it really, really real and really practical here. Like, don't reshare that because it's making them even more popular than they deserve to be. But on the other side of that is that it's going to pop up in people's timelines again. And the viewing of that video, of that content, is re-triggering for dark-skinned people already in and of itself. And so don't repost the sensational content as clickbait, or just because you know it's going to get a lot of likes and comments and reshares and reposts, right? And so I think we have to be more responsible and more intentional about how we use social media. And even when we're trying to critique colorism, we have to ask ourselves, do I actually need to repost this very harmful thing? And it's the same thing when people talk about Black Lives Matter and not resharing the videos of, Black death. And so we don't have to reshare the hate. We don't have to repost it. But I definitely think social media has empowered people and given people a platform to spew hate. And for that reason, those of us who want to do the opposite, for those of us who want to show love and appreciation for dark skin and 4C hair and people of different body types and genders, like, we have to be reposting the positive content. Like, we have to be reposting and resharing, the really interesting critique of colorism, and not resharing just a straight up colorist post. And I hope that makes sense, folks. I hope that makes sense. Jandy, thank you for the badge. Y'all are, oh my gosh, I'm already in love with y'all. And then y'all are generous with me, and it just makes it even harder not to gush. Thank you, Jenny, for the badge. Thank you, Sharon's Dance, for buying a badge. Black Knight 06 says racism could not exist without colorism. Okay. Yeah, you see that? I like that. That's a good thing to say, right? If you're having a conversation with someone and they're trying to suggest that colorism is less important, or that we just need to get over colorism to focus on other important issues. I think that's a good comment to make, Black Knight 06 26.2, is that racism wouldn't exist without colorism, right? So again, I've said this before too, we can't ignore the literal impact that skin tone had in creating racial categories in the first place, right? It was very much a part of how racial categories came to be, is the fact that people had physical differences in their skin tone and hair textures. So that's definitely a part of the equation. All right, folks. So I'm going to keep going. I do have an important meeting to get to right after this, so I'm glad I'm doing okay on time. So the very last thing I'm showing as evidence of colorism is the research on colorism. And why am I saving the research on colorism as the last form of evidence? Again, because people do this with racism too. It's used as a tool to deny someone's testimony. It's used often in a manipulative way, right? To demand proof, to demand scientific proof, to demand, stats and numbers before I believe that what you experienced is a thing. And so research is helpful, very, very helpful. I'm not saying research is not important or helpful, but it should not be put on a pedestal, right? In terms of a dark-skinned woman saying, and I keep thinking about the Basketball Wives and the OG person on Basketball Wives talking about colorism. People kept saying, on Twitter, this ain't colorism, you just crazy. Basically, that's the summary of what people were saying on Twitter. Is that she's just mad, she's stretching, she's doing too much. It's not really colorism, it's not really colorism. And I've heard a lot of people use a dark-skinned woman's inability to pull out the latest research article, or her inability to cite book, chapter, and verse of Dr. So-and-so in 2014 on page 13 as an excuse not to listen to her, right? And anyone who's watching this, let's not practice that. But at the same time, research is so fun. I love the research on colorism. You know why? Because the people who are about to fix their mouths to say, oh, well, you just need to love yourself. Or, well, racism is the real problem. I'm like, oh, really? Well, what would you say? This is like a move I actually pulled in a presentation, y'all. I was like, what would you say if I told you that black girls were 3 times more likely to be suspended from school than white girls? And everybody was like, oh my gosh, that's so terrible. And we hate that. And yeah, that's inequality. That's unfair. And I said, well, it's interesting that you have that reaction when it's about racial inequality, because that statistic is actually based on color and not race. And it's not black girls and white girls, it's dark-skinned black girls and light-skinned black girls. And they like, oh, what? And so I love being able to use research as a tool in that sense, right? And for the people who try to say, oh, it's just about being the popular girl in school. Are you just mad because boys don't want to date you? I'm like, nah, fam. Like, all of the stuff y'all want to talk about when it comes to racial inequality, like we can have the same discussions about colorism, right? It's not just being homecoming queen. It's not just being getting married or, you know, being popular on social media. Like, this is having systemic impact, and people, they tense up when you pull out the statistics on them, and they like, oh, I can't dismiss it as trivial anymore, right? Is that petty? Is that like a petty use of research? So anyone, I saw some colorism researchers on here. Anyone who's like wants to use that tactic, like if you're talking about colorism, is to present it as a racial inequality first, and then let people be like, yeah, that's wrong. You know, you just shouldn't be suspending black girls more than white girls. And I'm like, okay, well, you feel that way about one inequality. How would you feel if I told you it was actually like within the same racial group? You still mad about that inequality? Like, why is one inequality so egregious, but another form of inequality is acceptable? Like, nah, let's keep that same energy, fam. That same energy y'all got for decrying racism. Let's keep that same energy to decry colorism. You feel me? All right, y'all. So I need to wrap it up here because I got to get to this meeting. But yeah. Oh, okay. Let me read a couple more comments. Jendelle Crutch says, we as researchers need to amplify the voices of those we study. I like that. So the experience of darker skinned people should be the evidence. 100%. Yeah. Sarah Bestwell says research costs money. If those with money don't care about colorism or funding research on colorism, how can we scientifically prove it exists? Very hard cycle. 100%. Yes. That's probably why, Sarah Bestwell, that a lot of the research on colorism is not the big like scientific studies. A lot of them are qualitative studies, which still take a lot of time, right? But they don't necessarily require the same kind of infrastructure that like a national survey requires and that kind of thing. And so you have like college students and like junior faculty like doing small focus groups and stuff, for example. And I've seen a lot of the research being based in sort of the qualitative study of like doing interviews, for example, or like survey participants where you like just stand in the quad on a college campus and ask students to like respond to a survey kind of thing. So again, the backing, the funding, like people have put so much resources into the topic of racism. And so I've talked about also the fact that when you go to a hospital, when you enroll in school, when you go to a therapist's office, like every aspect of our society collects data on race and ethnicity. And none of those surveys, none of those institutions, none of those places or organizations collect data on skin tone. Like none of them are collecting the data. And so it's hard to even just get the data in the first place. So there are so many hurdles to overcome and doing research on colorism in the first place. So kudos to people who have. Kudos to the researchers who have been paving the way for this work to happen for the past several decades. Ken says, have done that several times. My Creole family refuses to listen to anecdotal evidence. I have to use statistics. Yeah, exactly. And that their refusal to listen to anecdotal evidence is something that I hope we can change within the larger culture for real. Because white people do it to people of color. White people have been doing it to Black Lives Matter people. Like, well, I don't see it in my neighborhood, you know. So what are the real statistics? And Audre Lorde, Shout out to girl Audre Lorde in an interview with Adrienne Rich. Okay, so Audre Lorde and Adrienne Rich did a lot of interviews, and I know I'm going over. I gotta go. But she critiqued Adrienne Rich. She checked Adrienne Rich for demanding quote unquote evidence. Like, so this was like, decades ago. And she was saying how your demand for proof, your demand for evidence is proof of your devaluing of my perspective. You devalue the perspective and the experiences and the testimonies of Black people, and are centering your own point of frame of reference, centering your own means of logic, right? So much there. Okay, so from one dark skin to another, girl to another, thank you very much. Thank you, Sharon's Dans, and thank you, hey Keisha. Thank you all so much for the badges. I've said it before, it's a labor of love, but it's still labor. I'm going to keep doing it no matter what, but it definitely helps. It definitely means a lot. And then for the moral support that people continue to show me, don't stop. Like, I need it. All right. Love y'all so much, and I'll see you next week. Mwah.